Time for another comparison video. This time we have with us the Monoprice versus the Audio-Technica ATH-M40Xs. So this one's going to be kind of an interesting comparison, considering that they both perform the same function, or they're supposed to, except these are much more towards the budget area, whereas these are, well, still budget, but just not super budget like these are. These are like entry-level budget. These are like, I got birthday money from my mommy kind of budget. What a weird way to say it, but I mean, it's true. It is true. When you're like a 10-year-old and you get birthday money and it's like, wow, I'm rich now. I can't believe I have so much money. And you got like $50 from your parents. You know what I'm saying? Happy birthday, Jimmy. Anyway, so as far as build is concerned between these two, obviously the M40X is going to take the cake because although it is still plastic, it is a much tougher plastic with better build quality. And it's got some metal around the headband. Well, I guess the straps that attach the cup to the headband, which make it more durable. And they do feel more durable in the hand and just better feeling than the Monoprice. Not to mention the Monoprice, like I mentioned in the previous video, had this like residue right there. Let me see if I bring it up. Right there, has some residue from the factory when they put stuff together, and it's like, well, I'm not touching it and it's not getting in my way, but like I can totally tell that these weren't built with the utmost care because, well, that's not their purpose. That wasn't the point of these to begin with. So yeah, M40X definitely takes it there. Now, as far as the cables go, this one comes with two types of cables. It comes with a long straight cable and a medium length corded coiled cable. These are 2.5 millimeter with a lock mechanism to 3.5 millimeter and a 1/4 inch adapter on the other side. I find myself using the straight cable on this all the time because the coiled cable is just terrible. And the cable's pretty decent. I like it. But it does have that lock mechanism, which is definitely an advantage over these that do not have a lock mechanism. And these, by the way, have a 3.5 instead, which, well, can be viewed as a positive, which means that it's more universal. You can just grab any aux cord, plug it in, and it'll work. There should be no issues. So pros and cons to each, see how you like it. But generally speaking, if I were to have these and then want to use them portably, I would go to Amazon and purchase the cable with the 2.5 millimeter lock mechanism and an inline mic so that I could, change tracks, volume up, volume down without having to reach my phone whenever I'm traveling. It's just more comfortable and it's nice that way. So overall, I'm going to give it over to the M40Xs because rarely will you find yourself in a situation where, oh no, I lost my cable, what do I do now? You will find yourself in those situations, I guess, if you're not careful with your things. But generally speaking, you should be careful with your things. Unless it's one of these. Then you just throw it away or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, let's get to the comfort here. So the comfort, I guess, can be viewed as somewhat of a tie. And here's why. The Mono has better comfort around the pads, around your ears. This is definitely much more comfortable than the pads on the M40Xs, I believe. It's just less of a hot spot. They take longer to get warm, and you feel less fatigue, and the clamp on these is just a little harder than this. Whereas I found these to be perfect. I found these to be a little too clampy. Headband, on the other hand, is where the situation changes. And the headband, despite the fact that these don't really have any padding other than the very, very, very thin padding on the Audio-Technica headband, this is actually more comfortable and takes longer to get a hot spot than these. With these, I get them probably 15 minutes in. With these, probably takes 45 minutes to an hour, 30 minutes on a terrible day. You know how you have some days where you're feeling extra sensitive around the ears and the head. And then some days where you just put them on and they feel super comfortable. So yeah. So as far as comfort goes, pick your poison. Do you want to be more comfortable around the ears or around your head? The top of your head. That's up to you. As far as amping goes, well, these pretty much require no amp whatsoever. And these, although they don't require an amp, they do scale a teensy tiny bit from using a decent amp. So these benefit a tiny bit. These don't benefit at all. Well, or pretty much nothing whatsoever. Like nothing worth noting is what I meant to say. Now let's get to the sound. The bass, I'm gonna give it to the M40Xs. Even though I wrote it down as like a tie, I think the M40Xs ultimately take the cake here. But here's why. Although the bass here is cleaner and more articulate around the sub bass and the general bass area, the monos have deeper extension, slightly deeper is what I meant to say, and the overall bass is slightly larger, which if that's your thing, that's kind of good, but that extra difference between these two, like let's say this one has like +4 bass, this one has +5, that +1 difference is kind of lost in the lack of clarity for these, because these are budget. So yeah, slightly bassier, but slightly muddy, just slightly muddied up by that lack of clarity. So just keep that in mind. But they're both, I mean, I want to say pretty bassy. They both provide quite a powerful punch. And if that's your thing, that's great. And if not, well, I'm sorry to say, but it's going to be really tough to find a portable closeback that doesn't do that. So good luck with that. Now, the mids. Overall speaking, as far as price to performance goes, I think I give it to the mono, honestly. Because although the M40Xs have slightly more clear vocals, the vocals here are slightly more forward and discernible, yet they are a tad more sibilant at times. It really depends, but they get about equally as sibilant with the vocals, like in a particular peak area with the S's, but it's like in different situations, not in exactly the same situation. But overall speaking, I mean, I happen to hear vocals on these a little better than I happen to hear them on the M40Xs, but the clarity on the M40Xs is better. So I believe as far as monitoring goes, I think the M40Xs would still take it, because although it wouldn't be as easy to hear the vocals, it would be much easier to discern whether there's something to be done, if you need to clean them, if you need to mess with them, edit them a bit so that they're more to your liking and more professional. So yeah, I want to say M40Xs. And the treble, here's a bit of a tie. So here's why. The M40Xs get more sibilant in the treble because, as I said in the previous video, these are kind of dark for a closed-back headphone, with the exception of a little bit of a peak here and there, but nothing significant. Now these, on the other hand, are definitely closer to what you might call a V-shape, whereas these have somewhat of an emphasis in the treble, so they have sharper highs, but the trade-off is that they're very crystal and very airy. It's just great sparkly treble without, well, they can get a tad too sibilant, but you get very used to like 90 to 95% of that treble, and you'll be perfectly fine. So the mono is darker, like I said, but it's a little more obscure at the same time. You know, with that darkness comes confusion. I meant for that to sound a little more, a little wiser, a little more, whatever. Anyway, the M40X is more emphasized cymbals, and whereas on the mono, they're a little more hidden, but they're relaxed, so they are less sibilant and less fatiguing than the M40Xs. Now, as far as Soundstage goes, they're about the same, honestly. They're moderately wide for a closed-back headphone, nothing significant, nothing terrible, but here's where the tiebreaker comes in. With the imaging, the M40X takes the cake because it takes more advantage of the soundstage than the mono does. Like, let me let me see if I can explain this well. Like as far as soundstage and imaging, this is the way I picture things in my head, right? Let's say soundstage is a big plate, like a plate where you put your food, right? Soundstage could be a narrow plate, could be a big plate, could be a massive wide plate. It depends. Let's say these are a medium-sized plate, and let's say you have foods on them. Now the foods are something like they're not solid, but they're not completely liquid either. There's something that holds their shape if you put them on in a certain area and position it in a particular way, but it doesn't just like spread out and all over the bowl, all over the plate either. It's like a semi-solid, semi-liquid situation, right? So let's say you have these different foods, and those foods represent vocals, imaging, instruments, the separation, stuff like that. So with the M40Xs, those instruments are a little more spread apart, which allow them to take advantage of the majority or the entire soundstage available of the plate. Whereas with these, they're more huddled up. They're more, they're still close together, so the separation isn't like fantastic or anything, but they're more huddled up towards the center as opposed to the edges of the plate. So you can hear, for example, at least that's the way I perceive it, you can hear that there's this entire area that the headphones can cover, but they only cover like the center area per se. Whereas with these, let's say you have the exact same surface area, but your foods are spread more far apart. So you're able to distinguish between them a little easier. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. The additional clarity on these greatly helps with the positioning, for sure. And the Monoprice is kind of lackluster, honestly, whereas the M40 is decent for a budget closed-back headphone. So, overall, I give it to the M40X for most occasions. Listen, if you have more than $20 to spend on a closed-back headphone, please do yourself a favor and get the M40Xs or something similar. It's going to greatly pay off for you, and you won't be disappointed. I guarantee it. Unless you just straight up don't like the sound signature. But sound quality-wise, you won't be disappointed. So for most occasions, M40Xs. Also for pros, do not try to do professional work on these unless it's something very, very, very casual or something you're going to do like 2 or 3 times in your life. Stuff like that. I'd say these are more well-suited for like a throwaway pair for travels and only for music listening. So if you're that, like, let's say 1/4 or 1/5 of the population that just wants these to to throw them in a bag, literally, and to just pull them out for whenever you're on the train or whenever you take a bus trip or something, then these are the way to go. But you can also do that with these if you're willing to spend a little extra and get that extra sound quality and build quality and just better pretty much everything. So you can do that with these too. And that's where I'm going to leave it off. Overall, I did enjoy both of these, each for a different reason. But they're pretty decent. They are pretty decent. Both of these I recommend mostly for like EDM and stuff where the bass is dominant. Where the dominance in the bass is a positive thing as opposed to a negative thing whereas like, I don't know, with jazz or something where the string bass is like so forward that it sounds boomy and muddy and stuff like that. No, don't do that. That's where I'm going to leave it off. Also, big shout out to my friend. I'm not going to name him because I don't know if he wants to be named or not, but shout out to... No, I can't call him that. I'll just call him Goose. Thank you, Goose, for lending me these. They were quite fun to listen to, and I guess I owe you. Awesome.